Part 1. For millennia, the Arctic has held a grip on the human imagination. A realm of ice and snow, of perpetual twilight and unforgiving cold, it has been a place of legend, of hardship, and of tantalizing mystery. Explorers have braved its frozen embrace, seeking passage, seeking knowledge, seeking perhaps, the edge of the world. But what if the Arctic holds secrets far more profound than we ever imagined? What if, beneath the shifting ice floes and the frigid depths, lies something not of this world? Something artificial, something colossal, something, a megastructure. The very idea seems fantastical, bordering on the absurd. A megastructure, a construct of such immense scale that it dwarfs our most ambitious engineering feats, hidden beneath the Arctic ice? Yet, the universe is vast, ancient, and full of possibilities that stretch the limits of our understanding. And perhaps, just perhaps, the whispers of the unknown have been echoing from the Arctic all along, masked by the howling winds and the groaning ice. The seed of this extraordinary notion is planted in the realm of scientific speculation, a thought experiment born from the intersection of astronomy and archaeology. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, has traditionally focused on scanning the cosmos for radio signals, for the telltale signs of a technologically advanced civilization. But what if these civilizations communicate in ways we haven't yet conceived? What if they leave behind not radio waves, but physical artifacts, testaments to their existence scattered throughout the galaxy? This leads us to the concept of Dyson spheres, hypothetical megastructures theorized by physicist Freeman Dyson. These colossal constructs, envisioned as spheres encompassing entire stars, would harness the immense energy of their suns, providing power on a scale unimaginable to us. While a full Dyson sphere around our sun seems unlikely, smaller, partial Dyson structures, perhaps orbiting distant stars, are not beyond the realm of possibility. But what if, instead of looking outwards, we should be looking inwards, towards our own solar system? Could a megastructure, perhaps not on the Dyson scale, but still immense, be concealed within our cosmic neighborhood? The Arctic, with its vast, unexplored expanse, presents itself as a potential hiding place. The ice, a formidable barrier, could conceal a structure of immense size, shielding it from prying eyes and the ravages of time. The extreme environment would naturally deter exploration, preserving the secret beneath the ice. And the remoteness of the location, far from the bustling centers of human civilization, would further contribute to its concealment. Consider the challenges of exploring the Arctic. The shifting pack ice, the unpredictable weather, the extreme cold. These factors make even basic exploration a daunting task. Now imagine trying to locate and investigate a structure potentially larger than any human-made object. The logistical hurdles would be immense, requiring technology and resources beyond our current capabilities. And even if we could overcome these challenges, what would we find? The potential implications are staggering. A megastructure in the Arctic, if discovered, would revolutionize our understanding of the universe and our place within it. It would be irrefutable proof of extraterrestrial intelligence, a testament to the existence of civilizations far beyond our own. It would open up a Pandora's box of questions, challenging our most fundamental beliefs about life, technology, and the history of our planet. But what kind of megastructure might we find beneath the ice? Could it be a remnant of a long-lost civilization, a relic of a time when Earth was visited by beings from other stars? Could it be a functioning device, a piece of technology with a purpose we cannot yet comprehend? Or could it be something else entirely, something beyond our wildest imaginations? The very act of contemplating these possibilities opens up a vista of wonder and speculation. It forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and to acknowledge the vastness of the unknown. The Arctic, once seen as a desolate wasteland, transforms into a canvas for the imagination, a place where the impossible might just be real. The ice, once a barrier, becomes a veil, hiding a secret that could change everything. The groaning intensified, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate not just through the ice, but through the very marrow of our bones. The aurora, a swirling, ethereal curtain of green and violet, pulsed in time with the groaning, casting an unsettling light on the stark white landscape. We huddled closer together, the five of us a tiny, vulnerable speck against the immense, indifferent expanse of the Arctic. "It's getting closer," whispered Anya, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Her eyes, wide and reflecting the otherworldly glow, were fixed on the shifting ice ahead. Captain Volkov, his normally stoic face etched with concern, gripped his rifle tighter. "Stay alert. Whatever it is, it's massive." The initial fissure we discovered, a jagged crack that had seemed impossibly deep, was now widening, revealing a blackness that swallowed the light. It wasn't simply a crevasse, it felt like a gaping maw, an entrance to some subterranean realm. The groaning reached a crescendo, followed by a sharp crack like a gunshot. A section of the ice sheet, larger than a football field, collapsed into the darkness, sending a shudder through the remaining ice. We scrambled back, the ground unsteady beneath our feet. The aurora flared brighter, painting the newly revealed chasm in an eerie, pulsating green. And then, we saw it. Protruding from the darkness, a colossal, geometric structure, its surface a strange, obsidian-like material. It wasn't ice, nor rock, nor anything we'd ever encountered before. It shimmered faintly under the aurora, its angles and planes too perfect, too precise to be natural. It was a fragment of something larger, something buried deep beneath the ice, something ancient. "By God," breathed Dr. Moreau, his voice barely audible. He clutched his notebook, his hand trembling as he tried to sketch the impossible structure. It's like nothing I've ever seen." The groaning resumed, deeper and more resonant than before, accompanied by a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to emanate from the structure itself. The air grew colder, a biting, unnatural cold that seeped into our clothes, into our skin, into our very bones. "We need to get out of here," Volkov said, his voice strained. "This isn't natural. This is something else." We turned to retreat, but the ice beneath our feet shifted again, a deep rumbling echoing from the chasm. Another section of the ice sheet fractured, cutting off our escape route. We were trapped, stranded between the gaping maw of the megastructure and the unforgiving Arctic wilderness. The humming intensified, resonating within our skulls, a disorienting, hypnotic drone. The obsidian structure began to glow, emitting a pale, ethereal light that cast strange, elongated shadows across the ice. The air shimmered, distorting the landscape around us. We stumbled, our senses overwhelmed by the cacophony of sounds and the unnatural light. Then, from the depths of the chasm, something emerged. It was a shape, a silhouette against the glowing structure, too large to comprehend, too alien to describe. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its form shifting and undulating in the shimmering air. It was as if the aurora itself had taken on a physical form, a being of pure light and shadow. Terror gripped us, a primal, paralyzing fear. We were insignificant, insects before a god. Anya screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound that was swallowed by the humming. Volkov raised his rifle, but his hands shook so violently he could barely aim. Dr. Moreau collapsed to his knees, muttering incoherently. The shape drifted closer, its presence filling the air with an oppressive weight. The humming intensified, becoming a piercing shriek that resonated deep within our minds. We could feel its presence probing our thoughts, our memories, our very essence. Suddenly, the aurora flared with blinding intensity, bathing the landscape in a sea of emerald and violet. The humming ceased, replaced by an echoing silence. The shape vanished, as if it had never been there. The obsidian structure dimmed, its glow fading into the darkness of the chasm. The silence stretched, broken only by the ragged breaths of the survivors. We stood there, frozen in place, our minds reeling from the encounter. The aurora slowly subsided, leaving the Arctic landscape bathed in the pale light of the moon. We were alone again, but the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the unspoken knowledge of what lay beneath the ice, a presence that was ancient, vast, and utterly alien. And we knew, with a chilling certainty, that it was aware of us. We were no longer exploring the Arctic. We were being observed. The ice groaned again, a low, mournful sound. It felt like a warning. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 3. The grinding groan resonated again, a deep, guttural sound that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the glacier. Dr. Anya Sharma clutched her thermal mug tighter, the lukewarm coffee doing little to dispel the creeping chill that had settled deep in her bones. It wasn't just the Arctic air, it was the oppressive silence punctuated by these unsettling sounds, a silence that felt heavy, expectant. The initial excitement of their discovery had slowly curdled into a pervasive unease. The sonar readings had been unambiguous, something colossal lay beneath the ice, something impossibly vast and geometrically precise. Not a natural formation, a megastructure. The second groan, deeper and longer than the first, sent a tremor through the ice, rippling outwards from the epicenter of their research camp. The prefabricated buildings creaked in protest, the wind whipping through the gaps whistling a mournful tune. Anya exchanged a worried glance with Lars, the expedition's grizzled lead engineer. He just shrugged, his face etched with a stoic resignation that bordered on fatalism. "Icequakes," he muttered, his breath clouding the frigid air. "Happens all the time." But Anya knew this was different. These weren't the sharp, brittle cracks of shifting ice sheets. This was a slow, agonizing groan, like the earth itself was stretching and complaining under an unbearable strain. Their comms specialist, a young, perpetually nervous man named Ben, burst into the central hub, his face pale. "The drone, it's gone offline." Anya's heart sank. They had sent a remotely operated drone down the newly melted borehole, hoping to get visual confirmation of the sonar readings. It had descended for almost a kilometer, transmitting increasingly bizarre readings of anomalous magnetic fields and fluctuating temperatures, before going abruptly silent. "Any interference?" Lars asked, his voice tight. Ben shook his head. "Nothing. Just, gone." The implications hung heavy in the air. Something down there had swallowed their drone. The following days were a blur of anxious activity and mounting dread. They drilled a second borehole, further away from the first, hoping to circumvent whatever had interfered with the drone. This time, they lowered a tethered probe equipped with a high-resolution camera and a suite of scientific instruments. The descent was excruciatingly slow. Every meter felt like an eternity, the winch groaning under the strain. Anya watched the monitor, the grainy black and white image slowly revealing the icy walls of the borehole. Then, at a depth of 1,200 meters, the ice abruptly ended. The camera feed showed a vast, dark expanse. Not water, as they had expected, but emptiness. An impossible void that seemed to absorb all light. The temperature readings plummeted to levels that defied explanation, while the magnetometer spun wildly, registering a chaotic jumble of magnetic anomalies. Anya felt a prickle of fear crawl up her spine. This wasn't just a megastructure, it was something far stranger, something that defied the laws of physics as she understood them. Then, the camera flickered. A shape emerged from the darkness, indistinct at first, then resolving into a vast, angular structure that seemed to stretch beyond the camera's field of view. It was a dark, metallic surface, covered in intricate, geometric patterns that pulsed with an eerie, internal light. Anya gasped. It was alive. Or at least, it gave the impression of life. A pulsating, breathing entity that seemed to be aware of their presence. The probe's lights suddenly flickered and died. The monitor went black. The tether went slack. Panic flared in Anya's chest. They had lost another probe. Worse, they had awakened something. That night, the groaning returned, louder and more insistent than ever. It was accompanied by a low, rhythmic hum that resonated through the ice, a sound that seemed to vibrate deep within Anya's skull. She could feel it in her teeth, in her bones, a deep, unsettling vibration that spoke of immense power. Lars ordered everyone to evacuate, his usual stoicism replaced by a raw, primal fear. But it was too late. The ice beneath their camp began to crack, fissures spider webbing outwards with terrifying speed. The prefabricated buildings tilted and groaned, then collapsed into the widening chasm. Anya stumbled, falling to her knees as the ground beneath her gave way. She looked down into the abyss, the rhythmic hum growing louder, more insistent. And then, she saw it. Rising from the darkness, bathed in an eerie green glow, was the megastructure. It was vast, impossibly vast, dwarfing even the largest skyscrapers. Its surface pulsed with the same unnatural light she had seen on the monitor, the intricate geometric patterns shifting and morphing like a living organism. As the megastructure ascended, the humming intensified, morphing into a deafening roar. The ice cracked and shattered, the earth trembled. And then, Anya saw the openings, huge, gaping maw-like apertures that dotted the surface of the structure, pulsing with a malevolent green light. She knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever lay within those openings was not friendly. And it was hungry. The last thing Anya saw, before the ice swallowed her whole, was the vast, uncaring eye of the megastructure, staring down at her with cold, alien indifference. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 4 of 25. The echoing clang of the drill reverberated through the ice, a rhythmic pulse in a world of white silence. Every meter gained was a victory hard won, a slow descent into the heart of the unknown. The ice cores we extracted, however, offered more questions than answers. Deeper down, the ice was impossibly clear, devoid of the expected air bubbles and debris, like some ancient, perfectly formed glacier. Analysis showed trace elements unlike anything we'd encountered, hinting at a geological history that defied conventional understanding. The unsettling feeling that something was watching us intensified. The drone flights became increasingly erratic, its cameras occasionally glitching, displaying static bursts or fleeting images of impossible geometries that vanished before anyone could properly document them. Then there were the sounds. Not the grinding of the drill or the wind whistling across the desolate landscape, but something else. A low, resonant hum, almost subsonic, that seemed to vibrate through the ice itself, felt more than heard. It was a sound that bypassed the ear and resonated directly in the chest, a primal thrum that instilled a deep unease. Dr. Anya Sharma, our paleoclimatologist, became obsessed with the ice cores. She spent hours poring over them, her face a mask of grim concentration. One evening, she called an impromptu meeting in the cramped mess hall. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated, as if she hadn't slept in days. "There's something wrong," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "These cores, they're not just old. They're Precambrian, billions of years old." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled crew. The Cambrian period marked the explosion of complex life on Earth. Ice this old shouldn't exist. But, how? Lars, the lead driller, finally asked, voicing everyone's thoughts. Anya shook her head. "I don't know. But there's more. Look at this." She projected an image onto the makeshift screen, a microscopic view of the ice's crystalline structure. "These aren't naturally formed ice crystals. They're too perfect, too organized, almost artificial." The image on the screen showed a lattice of interlocking hexagons, each perfectly symmetrical, forming a repeating pattern of incredible complexity. It looked less like a natural formation and more like a blueprint, a meticulously designed structure on a molecular scale. That night, the humming intensified. It pulsed through the camp, vibrating the metal walls and floor, making sleep impossible. Several crew members reported seeing fleeting shadows at the periphery of their vision, dark figures that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. The sense of being observed became overwhelming. The next morning, we reached a depth of 1 kilometer. The drill suddenly stopped. Lars tried to retract it, but it wouldn't budge. "Something had it. It's stuck," he reported, his voice strained. "Something's got it. Something big." We gathered around the drilling platform, staring down into the dark abyss of the borehole. The hum resonated up from the depths, louder now, almost palpable. Then, the ice around the borehole began to glow. A faint, ethereal light emanated from below, gradually intensifying until it illuminated the entire drilling platform in a spectral blue luminescence. The ice creaked and groaned. Cracks began to spiderweb across its surface, radiating outwards from the borehole. The air grew cold, biting cold, and the wind picked up, howling across the desolate landscape. Suddenly, the drill lurched upwards with tremendous force, ripping free from whatever had held it captive. Attached to the drill bit was a shard of something. It was jet black, smooth as polished obsidian, and pulsed with the same ethereal blue light that emanated from the borehole. As we stared at it, mesmerized, the shard began to vibrate, emitting a high-pitched whine that made our teeth ache. The cracks in the ice widened, and the ground began to tremble. Then, with a deafening roar, the ice beneath the drilling platform shattered, revealing a vast chasm that plunged into unimaginable depths. The ethereal blue light flooded out, illuminating a colossal structure that rose from the darkness below. It was a city, or perhaps something beyond our comprehension of cities, built of the same black material as the shard, its impossible angles and curves defying Euclidean geometry. We stood on the precipice, staring in awe and terror at the megastructure that had lain hidden beneath the ice for eons. It was a sight that shattered our understanding of the world, a glimpse into a reality that we could scarcely comprehend. And then, from the depths of the chasm, something stirred. A vast, shadowy form began to rise, its outline barely discernible against the ethereal blue glow. It was immense, ancient, and utterly alien. The humming intensified, becoming a deafening roar that filled the air, and the wind howled in a frenzy, as if the very elements themselves were recoiling in terror. The thing was rising, and it was looking at us. Part 5. The Whispers of the Deep. The tremor returned, this time accompanied by a low, guttural groan that resonated through the ice and into the very bones of the aurora. It was a sound unlike anything any of us had ever heard, primal and unsettling. Dr. Singh, pale and clutching his datapad, muttered something about infrasound, frequencies below the range of human hearing, capable of inducing paranoia and terror. He looked like he was experiencing both firsthand. Captain Eva Rostova ordered a full systems check. Everything, inexplicably, came back green. The ice surrounding us, however, seemed to be shifting, groaning, almost breathing. The previously smooth surface now exhibited subtle undulations, like the chest of a slumbering giant. "Captain," Lieutenant Markov stammered, his voice tight with apprehension. "Sonar is picking up movement. Large movement. Below the ice." Rostova, her face grim, leaned closer to the sonar display. The screen showed indistinct, amorphous shapes shifting in the depths. They were too large to be any known marine life. Too organized to be natural formations. "Maintain course," she ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. "Increase sonar frequency. I want a clearer picture." The increased frequency only amplified the unsettling sounds. The groaning became punctuated by a series of clicks and whistles, metallic and alien. The sonar display, instead of clarifying the image, became even more chaotic. The shapes seemed to multiply, morphing and swirling into a maddening kaleidoscope. Then, the whispers began. Faint at first, barely audible over the groaning ice and the strange sonar echoes, they seemed to emanate from the depths themselves. Not distinct words, but more like whispers of thought, impressions of vastness and age, tinged with an unbearable sadness. Dr. Anya Sharma, our linguist, pressed her ear against the bulkhead, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. It's not any language I recognize. It's like concepts, raw emotions. Loneliness, despair?" The whispers grew in intensity, pressing against our minds like icy fingers. Several crew members began to exhibit signs of distress, clutching their heads and moaning. The sense of dread that had permeated the aurora since our arrival intensified, thickening the air like a physical presence. "It's affecting the crew," Dr. Singh said, his voice strained. "We need to get out of here, Captain." Rostova hesitated. The scientist in her craved answers, yearned to understand the mysteries hidden beneath the ice. But the captain in her recognized the immediate danger. "Prepare for emergency ascent," she finally ordered. "All hands, brace for impact." As the aurora began its ascent, the whispers intensified, becoming a cacophony of alien thought that seemed to claw at the edges of sanity. The ice above us, now clearly visible through the reinforced viewing dome, began to crack and splinter. Huge, dark shapes moved beneath the surface, their forms still indistinct but undeniably massive. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from below, illuminating the ice with an eerie, otherworldly glow. Through the cracks, we saw it. A colossal structure, cyclopean and impossibly ancient, rising from the depths. Its surface was covered in intricate carvings, pulsing with the same unsettling light. It dwarfed the aurora, making our vessel seem like a toy in the presence of a titan. The ice shattered. We were plunged into the freezing water. The aurora tossed about like a leaf in a hurricane. Through the swirling chaos, we saw the megastructure looming over us, its immense form blotting out the sky. The whispers intensified, now a deafening roar of alien consciousness. They spoke of eons past, of civilizations lost, of a cosmic horror that lay dormant beneath the ice. The aurora, battered and breached, began to sink. The freezing water flooded the compartments, extinguishing the lights one by one. As the darkness closed in, I heard a final, chilling whisper, echoing not from the depths, but from within my own mind. Welcome home. The last thing I saw, before the icy blackness consumed me, was the megastructure descending upon us, its glowing carvings shifting and rearranging themselves into a single, monstrous eye, staring into the depths of my soul. Part 6. The Whispers of the Deep. The rhythmic thumping continued, a maddening counterpoint to the wind's howl. It resonated through the ice, through the metal of the drill, even through the bones in my chest. Sleep became a fractured, uneasy thing, punctuated by nightmares of colossal shapes moving beneath the ice, their vast, unseen eyes fixed on our fragile existence. Dr. Anya Sharma, our paleobiologist, became increasingly withdrawn. She spent hours poring over the core samples, muttering to herself in Russian, her face pale and drawn. The samples themselves were unsettling. Microscopic, geometric structures were embedded within the ice, unlike anything found in nature. They resembled intricate, three-dimensional snowflakes, too perfect, too complex to be natural formations. When questioned, Anya would only shake her head and murmur about impossible symmetries and non-terrestrial origins. The thumping grew louder. It was no longer a distant rumble, but a palpable presence, a heartbeat in the frozen wasteland. The crew's morale plummeted. Whispers replaced conversations. The men avoided each other's gaze, their faces etched with a primal fear. Even Captain Volkov, a stoic veteran of countless Arctic expeditions, seemed shaken. His usual jovial demeanor had been replaced by a grim silence. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, I found him staring out at the endless expanse of ice. "Captain," I ventured, "what do you think it is?" He turned to me, his eyes filled with a weariness I hadn't seen before. "I don't know, Dmitri. But I've spent my life on the ice, and I've never heard anything like this. It's unnatural." He paused, his gaze drifting back to the horizon. "The old stories, the legends whispered by the Inuit elders, they speak of something ancient slumbering beneath the ice. A being of immense power, a guardian of the north." I shivered, despite the layers of thermal clothing. "Legends, Captain?" He sighed. "Perhaps. But the ice holds many secrets, Dmitri. Secrets best left undisturbed." That night, the thumping intensified. It was accompanied by a new sound, a low, guttural hum that seemed to vibrate the very air around us. The lights flickered and the instruments in the research lab began to malfunction. Anya, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe, pointed at a monitor displaying the sonar readings. "Look," she cried, her voice strained. "It's moving. Something massive is moving beneath the ice." The sonar image showed a vast, amorphous shape shifting beneath the ice sheet. Its boundaries were indistinct, blurring and reforming like a shadow cast by a flickering flame. It dwarfed our icebreaker, making it look like a toy boat floating in a bathtub. Panic gripped the crew. Men shouted, prayed, and wept openly. Volkov, his face grim, barked orders, trying to restore some semblance of order. But it was too late. The fear was contagious, spreading through the ship like a virus. Suddenly, the ice beneath the ship groaned. A fissure, thin and jagged, snaked its way across the frozen surface, heading directly towards us. Then, with a deafening crack, the ice split open, revealing the dark, frigid waters below. The ship lurched violently, throwing us to the deck. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the widening crack in the ice, I saw it. A colossal eye, larger than any living creature I could imagine, rose from the depths. It was a deep, inky black, ringed by a luminescent blue halo. It gazed at us with ancient, unknowable intelligence. The hum intensified, resonating deep within my skull. I felt a strange pull, a compulsion to reach out, to touch the eye, to become one with the entity that lay beneath the ice. The whispers in the back of my mind, once faint and indistinct, now roared, promising power, knowledge, and a glimpse into the universe's deepest mysteries. I took a step towards the gaping maw of the abyss. Anya grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my flesh. "Dimitri, no," she screamed. "Don't listen to it. It's trying to control you." Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back from the brink of madness. But it was a tenuous hold, and the whispers were growing louder, more seductive. The eye blinked, and the ice around us began to groan again, threatening to swallow us whole. We were trapped, caught between the crushing ice and the terrifying entity that lay beneath. And in the depths of that ancient eye, I saw a reflection, not of myself, but of something else, something alien and terrifying, staring back at me from within. The whispers promised communion, but all I felt was dread. The ice was breaking, and so were we. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 7. The hum resonated deeper now, a physical vibration that crawled up through the ice and into our boots. It felt alien, wrong, like the earth itself was groaning in discomfort. The chasm we discovered, the impossible, perfectly circular hole in the ice, gaped before us, its edges rimmed with a strange, black frost that seemed to absorb light. Even the wind seemed hesitant to cross it, swirling around the perimeter like wary wolves. We'd lowered the ROV again, equipped this time with stronger floodlights and a more robust sonar system. Dr. Anya Sharma, our lead engineer, huddled over the monitors, her face pale in the artificial glow. The first images that crackled onto the screens showed nothing but the swirling snow and ice particles we'd seen before. But as the ROV descended further, something shifted. The snow seemed to thin, revealing a vast, inky darkness below. What is that?" whispered Dr. Chen, our geologist. The sonar pings started returning strange readings. They weren't reflecting off a solid surface, but something complex. Intricate patterns began to emerge on the sonar display, too precise, too regular to be natural formations. "It's structured," Anya breathed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "There's something down there." Slowly, painstakingly, the ROV descended further into the abyss. The hum intensified, now a low, throbbing pulse that seemed to synchronize with our own heartbeats. The darkness on the screens was absolute, broken only by the flickering beam of the ROV's lights. Then, a shape emerged from the black. It was a wall, a colossal, impossibly smooth wall that stretched beyond the limits of the ROV's cameras. It was made of a material unlike anything we'd ever seen. It wasn't rock, or ice, or metal. It was dark, almost obsidian-like, but with a subtle, internal luminescence, like embers glowing beneath a layer of ash. "My God," I muttered, feeling a cold dread seep into my bones. The ROV crept closer. The wall was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that looked vaguely familiar, yet utterly alien. They seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light, playing tricks on our eyes. Anya tried to focus the camera, but the symbols seemed to resist, blurring and distorting the image. "There's interference," she said, her voice strained. "Something's disrupting the signal." Suddenly, the hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The ROV's lights flickered violently and then died, plunging the screens into darkness. "We've lost the feed," shouted Anya, frantically tapping at the controls. The roar continued for a few more seconds, then abruptly ceased. The silence that followed was almost worse. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, the silence of a tomb. "Try the sonar," I said, my voice barely a whisper. Anya complied, but the sonar display remained blank. "Nothing. It's gone," she whispered, her face ashen. "The signal, it's just gone." We stood there in stunned silence, the only sound the howling wind outside. The chasm seemed to mock us, a gaping maw leading to an unknowable darkness. The fear in the room was palpable. We had found something immense and ancient, something that defied all our understanding of the world. And now, it knew we were here. We spent the next few hours trying to re-establish contact with the ROV, but to no avail. It was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The only evidence of its existence was the unsettling hum, which had returned, now a low, persistent drone that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the ice. That night, I couldn't sleep. The symbols we'd seen on the wall kept flashing in my mind, their alien forms burning themselves into my memory. I felt a growing sense of unease, a primal fear that something terrible was about to happen. Just before dawn, I heard a scream. It was Dr. Chen. I rushed out of my bunk to find him standing at the edge of the chasm, his eyes wide with terror. He was pointing down into the darkness, his hand trembling uncontrollably. They're coming," he stammered, his voice barely audible. I looked down into the chasm. At first, I saw nothing. Then, I noticed it. A faint, bluish light emanating from the depths. It was growing brighter, rising slowly towards the surface. And within that light, I could just make out shapes. Impossibly large shapes, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. The hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The ice beneath our feet began to tremble. The chasm widened, cracking and groaning under some immense pressure. And then, they emerged. Part 8. The Whispers of the Deep. The ice groaned and shifted around us, a constant, unsettling reminder of our precarious position. We had ventured further into the maw of the megastructure than any sane person would, drawn by the morbid curiosity that whispers in the face of the unknown. The central chamber, or what we assumed to be one, had opened into a vast, cavernous space. The artificial light from our headlamps struggled against the oppressive darkness, carving out fleeting glimpses of impossibly smooth, cyclopean walls that curved upwards into an unseen ceiling. The silence here was different. In the tunnels, there had been the drip of melting ice, the creak of the structure settling, the distant rumble that hinted at the colossal scale of what lay hidden. Here, the silence was absolute, a vacuum that sucked the sound from our own breaths. It pressed against our eardrums, heavy and expectant, a silence that listened. Dr. Anya Sharma, our geologist, ran a trembling hand over the wall. "This isn't natural," she whispered, her voice strained. "The striations. They're too precise, too uniform. Like it was extruded." Extruded. The word hung in the air, a testament to the alien nature of what we had found. It implied a level of engineering beyond our comprehension, a technology that could manipulate matter on a scale that dwarfed even our most ambitious projects. We pressed on, our boots crunching on the strange, crystalline dust that coated the floor. The air grew colder, biting at exposed skin. A faint, rhythmic pulsing began to emanate from the depths of the structure, a low thrum that resonated through the floor and up into our bones. It grew in intensity as we moved, a heartbeat of something vast and ancient. Suddenly, Petrov, our Russian security specialist, stopped dead. He stood rigid, his head cocked as if listening to something beyond the range of human hearing. A bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "Did you hear that?" he muttered, his voice barely audible. We strained our ears, but the only sound was the pulsing thrum and the rasp of our own breaths. "Hear what, Petrov?" Captain Eva Rostova asked, her voice tight with apprehension. He shook his head slowly, a look of bewilderment creeping across his face. "Whispers," I heard whispers. "Coming from everywhere." We exchanged uneasy glances. The oppressive silence seemed to deepen, amplifying the slightest sound, making every creak and groan of the ice seem pregnant with meaning. Paranoia gnawed at the edges of our sanity. Were we cracking under the pressure? Was the alien structure affecting us somehow? Then I heard it. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, a rustling sound, like dry leaves skittering across pavement. It grew louder, morphing into a chorus of whispers, swirling around us, seemingly emanating from the very walls themselves. The language was unintelligible, a cacophony of clicks and whistles, yet it carried an undeniable emotional weight, a sense of sorrow. Anya clutched her head, her face pale. I can't stand it." The whispers intensified, pressing in on us, wrapping around our minds like icy tendrils. They seemed to burrow into our thoughts, whispering secrets we didn't want to hear, painting images of vast, cosmic horrors that defied comprehension. The rhythmic pulsing quickened, matching the frantic beat of our hearts. Petrov screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was swallowed by the whispers. He clawed at his ears, his eyes wide with terror. He stumbled backward, tripped over a loose piece of ice, and disappeared into the darkness beyond the reach of our lamps. His scream echoed briefly, then was swallowed by the oppressive silence. Panic threatened to overwhelm us. We were trapped, surrounded by an unseen enemy, our minds besieged by whispers from the abyss. Eva, ever the stoic leader, forced herself to speak, her voice trembling. "We have to get out of here. Now." We turned to flee, our boots slipping on the icy dust. As we ran, the whispers grew louder, morphing into a deafening roar. The walls seemed to shift and distort, the smooth surfaces rippling like water. The pulsing reached a fever pitch, shaking the very foundations of the megastructure. We stumbled blindly through the darkness, driven by primal fear, pursued by the whispers of the deep. The ice groaned above us, threatening to collapse and bury us forever within the alien tomb. We were running for our lives, but from what, we didn't know. All we knew was that we had to escape, to get back to the surface, to the blessed silence of the Arctic wind. But the megastructure wasn't finished with us yet. It had more secrets to reveal, more horrors to unleash. And as we fled, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone in the darkness. Something else was there, something vast and ancient, and it was watching us. Listening, waiting. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 9. The echoing clang of the pickaxe against the obsidian-like material reverberated through the cavern, a discordant note in the otherwise oppressive silence. Each swing chipped away only microscopic fragments, mocking our efforts. The air, thick with the smell of ozone and something else, something faintly metallic and organic, made my lungs ache. "We're getting nowhere," Anya sighed, her breath clouding in the frigid air. Her face, usually bright and inquisitive, was etched with exhaustion and a growing unease. We'd been chipping away at the wall for hours, rotating shifts to conserve energy and warmth. The generator we'd salvaged from the abandoned Russian base sputtered inconsistently, its feeble light barely illuminating the cavern's vastness. The humming resonated strangely within the confined space, as if the very walls were absorbing and amplifying the sound. It was a nerve-grating counterpoint to the drip, drip, drip of melting ice from the cavern ceiling. The wall itself was an enigma. Its surface was impossibly smooth, reflecting the generator's light with a disturbingly organic shimmer. It felt colder than the surrounding ice, radiating a chill that seeped into your bones. It wasn't ice, nor rock, nor any material we could identify. Dr. Singh, his eyes bloodshot and his beard flecked with ice crystals, ran a gloved hand over the smooth surface. This defies explanation. Its molecular structure is unlike anything I've ever encountered. He pulled out a small device, a portable spectrometer, and pressed it against the wall. The device beeped erratically, its display flashing a chaotic jumble of symbols before going blank. It overloaded the sensor. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through my exhaustion. Whatever this structure was, it was far beyond our comprehension. We were children playing with fire, and we didn't even know what kind of fire it was. We continued our futile attempts to breach the wall, driven by a desperate hope that lay beneath the layers of fatigue and fear. Hope that we could find answers, hope that we could understand. Hours later, as the generator sputtered and threatened to die, a faint tremor ran through the cavern. The ice above us groaned, and a shower of frost rained down. We froze, listening, holding our breath. Another tremor, stronger this time. The ground beneath our feet shifted. A low, guttural hum filled the air, emanating from the obsidian wall itself. The hum intensified, growing into a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to penetrate our very being. Suddenly, a section of the wall began to glow with an eerie, pulsating light. The light intensified, spreading like veins across the surface. The humming reached a crescendo, and the air crackled with static electricity. We stumbled back, shielding our eyes from the blinding light. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, a fissure appeared in the wall. The fissure widened, revealing a passage bathed in an unearthly green light. The air rushing out of the opening was warm, carrying a strange, sweet scent that both invigorated and nauseated us. For a long moment, we stood frozen, staring at the opening, our minds struggling to comprehend what we were witnessing. The fear was still there, but it was mingled now with a potent cocktail of awe and morbid curiosity. Dr. Singh, his face pale but his eyes alight with a feverish intensity, stepped towards the opening. My God, it's incredible. Anya grabbed his arm. Wait, we don't know what's in there. He shook her off, his voice trembling with excitement. We have to find out. This could change everything. He took a deep breath and stepped through the opening. Anya and I exchanged a look of apprehension, then followed. The passage beyond the fissure was narrow and smooth, the green light emanating from its walls casting long, distorted shadows. The air was warm and humid, a stark contrast to the icy cavern we had just left. The sweet scent was stronger here, almost overpowering. It filled my lungs, making me feel lightheaded and disoriented. As we walked deeper into the passage, the green light intensified, revealing intricate patterns carved into the walls. The patterns seemed to shift and writhe before our eyes, creating an unsettling optical illusion. The humming sound, now a deep, pulsating drone, resonated through the passage, vibrating in our bones. I reached out to touch the wall, and a jolt of energy shot through my arm, causing me to recoil in surprise. The wall felt warm, almost alive. What is this place? Anya whispered, her voice barely audible above the humming. Dr. Singh, his eyes wide with wonder, shook his head. I don't know, but I intend to find out. He pressed forward, his pace quickening, drawn by the mysterious green light and the promise of discovery. We followed, our fear and apprehension battling against a growing sense of wonder and a terrifying premonition of what we might find at the end of this strange, pulsating passage. Part 10. The Whispers of the Deep. The cylindrical chamber we discovered pulsed with a faint, rhythmic thrumming. It emanated not from the walls themselves, but from something deeper, something hidden beneath the ice-like floor. Each pulse sent a tremor through our boots, a subtle vibration that resonated unnaturally within our chests. The air, already thin and cold, seemed to grow heavier, the silence punctuated by the echoing drips of melting ice and the increasingly erratic rasp of Anya's breath. There's something, down there, she whispered, her voice tight with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. She pointed a trembling finger at the floor. I can feel it. Dmitri, ever the pragmatist, unfolded a compact ground-penetrating radar unit. The screen flickered to life, displaying a chaotic jumble of lines and static. He adjusted the settings, his brow furrowed in concentration. The ice is too thick. I can't get a clear reading. Maybe there's another way down? Lena's voice, usually brimming with optimism, was now laced with apprehension. She shone her flashlight along the curving walls, searching for any sign of a passage or opening. We split up, our beams of light cutting through the oppressive darkness. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic thumping beneath us, a heartbeat of something vast and unknown. The regularity was unnerving, a steady pulse against the chaotic backdrop of the Arctic wilderness. As I moved along the wall, I noticed a series of intricate carvings etched into the icy surface. They were unlike anything we'd seen before, a complex web of symbols and geometric patterns that defied easy interpretation. They seemed to writhe and shift in the periphery of my vision, as if alive. I ran my gloved hand over the cold surface, tracing the lines. A sudden chill, deeper than the ambient cold, ran down my spine. The carvings felt strangely warm beneath my touch. I found something. Lena's voice echoed from the other side of the chamber. We converged on her position, our lights illuminating a section of the floor where the ice appeared thinner, almost translucent. Beneath it, we could make out a darker shape, something vast and shifting. Dmitri approached cautiously, tapping the ice with his pick. A low, resonant hum filled the air, emanating from below. The ice cracked under the impact, spiderweb fractures spreading across the surface. We held our breath, our hearts pounding in unison with the rhythmic thumping from below. With a final, sharp crack, a section of the ice gave way, revealing a dark, watery abyss. The hum intensified, morphing into a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate within our very bones. A foul, metallic odor wafted up from the depths, stinging our nostrils and coating our tongues with a coppery taste. "What is that smell?" Anya gasped, covering her mouth with her gloved hand. We peered into the darkness, our flashlights unable to penetrate the murky depths. The growling continued, growing louder, closer. Then, something moved in the water. A large, dark shape, too vast to fully comprehend, rose slowly from the abyss. It was only partially visible in the dim light, but we could make out what appeared to be massive, segmented limbs, covered in a thick, pulsating membrane. A wave of primal terror washed over us. This was no ordinary creature. It was something ancient, something alien. Suddenly, a high-pitched, keening sound filled the air, cutting through the growling. It was coming from the carvings on the walls. The symbols were glowing now, emitting a faint, ethereal light. The sound intensified, morphing into a series of whispers, too quiet to decipher, yet somehow penetrating directly into our minds. The whispers seemed to coil around our thoughts, weaving a tapestry of alien images and sensations. I felt a strange pull, a yearning to reach out and touch the creature in the water, to become one with its vast, unknowable being. Beside me, I could see the same glazed look in Lena's eyes, the same unsettling fascination. Dimitri, however, seemed unaffected. He gripped his pick tightly, his knuckles white. "We need to get out of here," he growled, his voice strained. "Now." He grabbed Anya's arm and pulled her away from the opening. She resisted at first, her eyes still fixed on the creature below, but Dimitri's iron grip forced her to turn. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a desperate urgency. "Alexei, snap out of it." His words, sharp and clear, cut through the whispers, momentarily breaking their hold on my mind. I blinked, shaking my head as if to clear the cobwebs. The creature in the water seemed to recede into the darkness, its growling fading into the background hum. The whispers, though still present, were now weaker, more distant. We stumbled back from the opening, our minds reeling from the encounter. The whispers lingered, a faint echo of something vast and incomprehensible, a chilling reminder of the secrets hidden beneath the ice. As we retreated back down the tunnel, the rhythmic thumping followed us, a persistent heartbeat in the frozen wasteland, a promise of something darker still to come. Part 11. The Whispers of the Deep. The descent continued. The ice shaft, a near-perfect cylinder, plunged deeper than anything man-made should. Every few hundred feet, the bioluminescent moss pulsed, bathing the walls in an unsettling green light that made the smooth, obsidian-like ice shimmer. We were miles down now, the tether a lifeline stretching taut above us, a tangible representation of the immense pressure bearing down from the ice above. The silence, broken only by the whir of the winch and our ragged breaths, was oppressive. It was a silence pregnant with anticipation, a silence that screamed of something unseen, something waiting. We passed more of the strange glyphs etched into the ice, their intricate patterns growing more complex, more alien, the deeper we descended. Dr. Singh, normally a fount of nervous energy, was strangely subdued, his gaze fixed on the wall, tracing the glyphs with his gloved finger. "They're changing," he muttered, his voice barely audible above the winch's hum. "Becoming more organic." I peered closer. He was right. The lower glyphs seemed to pulse faintly with the same greenish light as the moss, their lines flowing and shifting like veins. Some resembled grotesque, distorted faces, their eyes wide and staring, their mouths agape in silent screams. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. "Are those faces?" I asked, my voice catching in my throat. Singh nodded slowly, his eyes wide. I think they're alive." Before I could process this horrifying thought, the winch jerked, throwing us off balance. The descent stopped abruptly. "What happened?" Captain Petrov's voice crackled over the comms. "Why did you stop?" "We didn't stop, Captain," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. "The winch stopped. We're checking it topside. Stay put." The silence returned, heavier now, charged with an almost palpable dread. The air grew colder, the green luminescence of the moss dimming slightly, plunging us into semi-darkness. And then we heard it. A faint whispering. At first, I thought it was the wind whistling through the ice above, but the sound was different. It was closer, coming from below, from the depths of the shaft. It was a chorus of whispers, too low and indistinct to understand, yet somehow imbued with a chilling intelligence. They seemed to slither around us, probing, questioning. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Singh nodded, his face ashen. It's coming from below." The whispers intensified, growing louder, more insistent. They seemed to be closing in, wrapping around us like icy tendrils. I could feel the vibrations in the ice, in my bones, in my teeth. The air crackled with an unseen energy. And then, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying than the sound itself. It was the silence of a predator waiting to strike. Suddenly, the ice beneath us began to glow. The faint green light intensified, becoming blindingly bright. We shielded our eyes, but the light seemed to penetrate our eyelids, searing our retinas. The ice beneath our feet felt warm, almost pulsating. It was as if the entire shaft was coming alive. Then, the ice beneath us cracked. A fissure, thin and jagged, snaked across the floor of the shaft, emanating a blinding white light. The crack widened, spreading rapidly, the edges glowing with an unearthly luminescence. We stumbled back, our boots scrabbling for purchase on the slick ice. The whispers returned, louder than before, filled with an almost palpable malice. They seemed to be coming from the fissure itself, from the heart of the ice. We were trapped. Above us, the winch remained silent. Below us, the ice was breaking apart, revealing a chasm of blinding light and terrifying whispers. The megastructure, whatever it was awakening. "Captain," I shouted into the comms, my voice laced with panic. "We need to get out of here. The ice is breaking apart." Static crackled in response. "Captain? Can you hear me?" Silence. The fissure widened, the light intensifying, the whispers growing into a deafening roar. I looked at Singh, his face a mask of terror. We were about to face whatever lay hidden beneath the ice, and a chilling certainty gripped me that whatever it wasn't friendly. The tether above us snapped. Part 12. Whispers in the White Void. The tremor returned, this time accompanied by a low, guttural hum that resonated through the ice, through the ship, through us. It felt less like a geological event and more like a gargantuan beast shifting in its slumber. The hum pulsed with a strange rhythm, almost a heartbeat, but far too slow, too deliberate for anything organic we knew. Fear, thick and suffocating, pressed against us like the glacial walls of our icy prison. We huddled in the mess hall, the flickering emergency lights casting grotesque shadows that danced with the vibrations. Dr. Anya Sharma, our paleobiologist, clutched a crucifix, muttering prayers in hushed Russian. Captain Eva Rostova, her usual stoicism cracked, paced the length of the table, her fingers drumming a frantic tattoo against her thigh. I, David Chen, the expedition's journalist, clutched my notebook, the ink blurring as my hand trembled. The hum intensified, the ice groaned, and a fine dust of frost rained down from the ceiling. We watched in horrified fascination as hairline fractures spider-webbed across the metal walls of the mess hall. The ship, our sanctuary, was beginning to yield to the immense pressure. Then, the comms crackled to life. It wasn't a human voice that greeted us, but a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and guttural growls. A chilling, alien language that seemed to slither into our minds, evoking primal terror. What is that?" stammered Dr. Sharma, her eyes wide with fear. Captain Rostova, her face ashen, fumbled with the comms. This frequency, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. It's almost sentient." The alien sounds intensified, morphing into a rhythmic pulse, a hypnotic drone that seemed to burrow into our brains. We clutched our heads, trying to block out the invasive noise, but it was useless. The sound permeated everything, vibrating through our very bones. Suddenly, the humming stopped. The clicks and whistles ceased. Silence, heavy and pregnant with unspoken horror, descended upon us. We looked at each other, our faces mirroring the same stark terror. What had we awakened? Then, a new sound emerged, faint at first, then growing steadily louder. It was a scraping, grinding noise, like metal against metal, but on a scale so vast it defied comprehension. It was coming from outside, from beneath the ice. Captain Rostova rushed to the observation deck. We followed close behind, our hearts pounding in our chests. Through the thick, reinforced glass, we saw it. The ice. It was moving. Vast sections of the frozen landscape were shifting, cracking, revealing glimpses of something colossal beneath. It was dark, impossibly dark, like a gaping maw in the white expanse. The scraping sound intensified as the ice continued to grind against this hidden behemoth. Then, with a sickening lurch, the ship tilted violently. We scrambled for handholds, sliding across the deck as the vessel groaned and creaked under immense strain. Through the observation window, we saw the source of the movement. A colossal, obsidian-black structure, angular and alien, was rising from the depths. It dwarfed our ship, dwarfing everything we had ever known. It was a nightmare made manifest, a testament to an ancient, unknowable power. The structure was covered in intricate carvings, glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe before our eyes. They pulsed with a faint, internal light, the same eerie glow we had seen in the ice caves. As we watched, mesmerized by the sheer scale of the structure, the glyphs began to emit the same alien clicks and whistles we had heard over the comms. It was communicating, but to whom? A chilling realization washed over me. We weren't the first to discover this place. The messages weren't meant for us. They were meant for something else. Something far older, far more powerful than we could possibly imagine. The ship lurched again, this time more violently. The ice around us began to crack and crumble, threatening to engulf us in the frigid abyss. We were trapped, caught between a monstrous, awakening entity and the unforgiving Arctic wilderness. Suddenly, the alien sounds shifted, taking on a new, urgent tone. It was as if the structure was calling. And then, we saw them. Shapes. Vast, amorphous shapes moving beneath the ice, drawn to the structure like moths to a flame. They were darker than the surrounding water, darker even than the structure itself, their forms shifting and undulating in the depths. We could only glimpse them through the fractured ice, but the sheer scale of them was enough to send shivers down our spines. These were the recipients of the message. And they were coming. The ship groaned, metal screaming in protest as the pressure intensified. We were running out of time. Out of options. Out of hope. The Arctic, once a desolate wasteland, was now teeming with an unimaginable horror. And we were caught in the middle. Trapped between the whispers and the white void and the creatures they had summoned. Part 13. The Whispering Gallery. The echoing drone intensified, resonating deep within our chests. A physical pressure now accompanying the auditory assault. The glyphs on the walls pulsed with a sickly, internal light, casting long, distorted shadows that writhed and shifted like trapped phantoms. The air itself seemed to vibrate, thick with an unseen energy. This is getting bad, Anya stammered, her voice tight with fear. Her hand, still clutching mine, was clammy and cold. We pressed on, deeper into the megastructure, the corridor sloping gently downwards. The drone became interspersed with a new sound, a faint, high-pitched whispering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a language we couldn't understand, a sibilant, rustling chorus that insinuated itself into our minds, a chilling counterpoint to the oppressive drone. Do you hear that? Dmitri whispered, his eyes wide with terror. He pointed a trembling finger at the walls. It's like they're talking to us. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into distinct, though still incomprehensible, phrases. The feeling of being observed, which had been a constant companion since our descent, intensified, pressing down on us like a physical weight. It felt as though unseen eyes were boring into us, dissecting our thoughts, our fears. We reached a large, circular chamber. The walls were covered in the same pulsing glyphs, but here they were larger, more intricate, forming complex patterns that seemed to shift and rearrange themselves before our eyes. The whispering here was deafening, a cacophony of voices swirling around us. The drone, however, had ceased, replaced by an unnerving silence that amplified the whispering tenfold. In the center of the chamber, a single, colossal pillar reached towards the domed ceiling. It was constructed of the same obsidian-like material as the rest of the structure, but its surface was smooth, polished to a mirror sheen. The glyphs on the pillar pulsed with an almost blinding light, the epicenter of the unnerving energy that permeated the chamber. As we approached the pillar, the whispering seemed to focus, coalescing into a single, piercing voice that resonated directly inside our skulls. It spoke in the same unintelligible language, but now, beneath the alien sounds, we could detect a different layer, a deeper, more primal communication. It was a feeling, more than a sound, a wave of pure, unadulterated dread. Anya cried out, clutching her head. "Make it stop. Please, make it stop." Dmitri stumbled back, his face ashen. He muttered something in Russian, a prayer perhaps, or a curse. I felt it too, the overwhelming sense of dread, the primal fear that crawled beneath my skin, infecting my thoughts. It was a fear so profound, so ancient, that it resonated with some deep, forgotten part of my being. It spoke of a vast, unknowable horror, a cosmic indifference that dwarfed human comprehension. The whispering intensified, becoming a shriek, a roar that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. The glyphs on the pillar blazed with blinding light, and the air crackled with energy. I felt a pull, a magnetic force drawing me towards the pillar. I tried to resist, to pull back, but the force was too strong. Anya and Dmitri were screaming, their voices lost in the cacophony. The floor beneath us vibrated, and cracks began to appear on the walls. The chamber seemed to be shrinking, collapsing in on itself. I was being pulled towards the pillar, inexorably, helplessly. The whispering was now a physical force, buffeting me, pushing me forward. I reached out, my hand drawn to the smooth, obsidian surface. As my fingers brushed against the pillar, the whispering stopped. The light faded. The vibrations ceased. Silence. A heavy, oppressive silence descended upon the chamber. Anya and Dmitri lay huddled on the floor, whimpering, their faces pale and drawn. I stood there, my hand still resting on the pillar, feeling the cold, smooth surface beneath my fingertips. The fear, the dread, was gone, replaced by an unnerving emptiness. It felt as though something had been taken from me, a piece of my soul, leaving a hollow void in its place. Then, I heard it. A new sound, faint at first, but growing steadily louder. A heartbeat, slow, steady, and powerful, resonating from within the pillar, from within the megastructure itself. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that we had awakened something. Something ancient, something vast, and something utterly terrifying. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 14. The rhythmic clang of metal on ice echoed through the newly excavated cavern, each strike chipping away at the frozen veil obscuring the megastructure. The floodlights, strung precariously across the chasm's lip, cast long, dancing shadows that warped and writhed with every swing of the pickaxe. The air, thick with the frigid breath of the glacier, carried a metallic tang, a scent unlike anything we'd encountered before. It wasn't rust or iron, but something altogether alien. Elena, her face pale and drawn, huddled closer to the flickering heat lamp. She hadn't spoken much since the incident with the pulsating glyphs, her usual scientific curiosity replaced by a gnawing dread. I understood. We all felt it. Something about this place, this thing beneath the ice, felt profoundly wrong. We'd managed to clear a section of ice large enough to reveal a smooth, obsidian-like surface. It was perfectly flat, stretching into the darkness beyond the reach of our lights, and pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence. It felt warm to the touch, radiating an unnatural heat that defied the sub-zero temperatures. "It's organic," Anya whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind howling across the glacial plains above. She traced the surface with a gloved finger, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Organic?" I echoed, skepticism lacing my tone. This looks like polished stone." "No, feel it," she insisted. "There's a give to it. A subtle vibration." I cautiously placed my hand on the surface. Anya was right. Beneath the seemingly solid exterior, there was a faint, rhythmic pulsation, like a gargantuan heart beating deep within the earth. The metallic scent intensified, accompanied now by a faint, sickly sweet odor, reminiscent of decaying flowers. "What do you think it is?" Boris, our geologist, asked, his voice strained. He circled the exposed section, his headlamp bobbing nervously. "Some kind of bioengineered material?" "Beyond anything I've ever seen," Elena finally spoke, her voice hoarse. She pointed to a series of faint lines etched across the surface, barely visible beneath the layer of frost that stubbornly clung to the obsidian. "Those markings, they resemble the glyphs we saw earlier, but simplified. Almost like a blueprint." We huddled around, tracing the lines with our fingers. They were intricate, interwoven in a pattern that seemed both chaotic and ordered. As we stared, the pulsing of the surface intensified, the faint luminescence brightening, casting an eerie, pulsating glow across the cavern. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the ice. We jumped back, startled, as a fissure snaked across the exposed surface, splitting it down the middle. The crack widened, revealing a seam of pulsating, bioluminescent light beneath. The sickly sweet odor intensified, becoming almost overpowering. "Back! Everyone back!" I shouted, sensing a primal, instinctive danger. As we scrambled back, the fissure continued to spread, branching out like lightning across the obsidian surface. From the widening cracks, a thick, viscous fluid began to seep, glowing with the same unsettling luminescence. It pooled on the ice, sizzling and melting it on contact, releasing clouds of noxious, sweet-smelling vapor. The ground beneath us began to tremble. The rhythmic pulsation we'd felt earlier intensified, becoming a violent throbbing. The entire cavern felt alive, as if the megastructure itself was waking from a long slumber. "We need to get out of here," Boris yelled, his voice laced with panic. We turned to flee, but as we did, a new sound emerged, drowning out the wind and the groaning ice. It was a low, resonant hum, emanating from the heart of the megastructure. The hum grew in intensity, resonating deep within our chests, vibrating our bones. It was a sound that seemed to bypass our ears and speak directly to our minds. A sound that carried a message, a warning. The viscous fluid spreading across the cavern floor began to coalesce, forming a pulsating, amorphous mass. It shifted and pulsed, growing larger with each passing second. The sickly sweet odor now filled the air, suffocating, nauseating. As I watched in horror, the mass began to take shape, extending pseudopods towards us, reaching, grasping. The luminescent fluid dripped from its form, burning through the ice, leaving trails of sizzling vapor in its wake. It wasn't organic in any way we understood. It was something else entirely. Something alien, something hungry. We were trapped in the belly of a monster, and it was waking up. Part 15. Whispers in the black water. The cavern echoed with a sound that wasn't a sound. A pressure, a vibration that wormed its way through the ice, through the submersible, through us. Dr. Singh clutched her ears, her face a mask of strained concentration. It's getting stronger. Like a sub-aural hum. But directional. We followed her gaze towards a newly revealed section of the megastructure, unveiled by the retreating, pulsating blackness. This section was unlike anything we'd seen before. No geometric patterns, no discernible purpose. It was a chaotic jumble of organic-looking tubes and nodules, glistening wetly under the submersible's lights. It pulsed with the same rhythm as the hum, a slow, sickening expansion and contraction. "Bioengineered," whispered Lieutenant Harper, his voice barely audible over the subaural thrumming. I don't know," stammered Dr. Singh, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "It looks almost grown." We edged closer, the submersible's lights cutting swaths through the oppressive darkness. The water itself seemed thicker here, viscous, almost reluctant to part for us. The hum intensified, vibrating the very bones in our bodies. I felt a creeping nausea, a disorientation that was more than just the confined space and the mounting dread. As we neared the pulsating mass, something shifted in the blackness beyond it. A shape, vast and undefined, began to coalesce. It wasn't solid, not exactly. More like a swirling congregation of shadows, an absence of light that somehow held a form. It shifted and writhed, the edges blurring and reforming, like a nightmare trying to solidify. What? What is that? Anders breathed, his voice a strangled whisper. No one answered. We were all transfixed by the swirling darkness, the oppressive sense of something ancient and unknowable watching us. The hum intensified, now accompanied by a new sound, a high-pitched whine that grated on our nerves. It felt like the very air was vibrating, the ice around us groaning under an unseen pressure. Then, from the heart of the darkness, came the whispers. Not actual words, not at first. More like the rustling of leaves in a windless forest, the murmuring of 1,000 unseen insects. A cacophony of whispers that seemed to claw at the edges of our sanity. They were in the water, in the ice, in our heads. Everywhere and nowhere, the whispers grew louder, sharper, taking on a semblance of language, a language not of this earth. It was a guttural, clicking language, laced with sibilant whispers and guttural growls. It slithered into our minds, evoking images of vast, alien landscapes, of monstrous shapes moving through the darkness, of things best left unseen. Dr. Singh screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound that was quickly swallowed by the oppressive hum. She clawed at her headset, her eyes wild with terror. Get us out of here, yelled Lieutenant Harper, his voice tight with panic. Reverse. Reverse. The submersible shuddered as the pilot threw the engines into reverse. We lurched backwards, away from the pulsating mass, away from the swirling darkness, away from the whispers that were now screaming in our minds. But we weren't fast enough. Something moved in the darkness. Something vast and powerful. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single, deafening roar. The submersible bucked violently, thrown sideways as if struck by a giant hand. The lights flickered, then died, plunging us into absolute darkness. The hum, the whine, the whispers, they were all around us, inside us. The submersible creaked and groaned under unimaginable pressure. We were trapped, helpless, at the mercy of whatever lurked in the black water. I heard Anders praying, a desperate plea to a god I wasn't sure even existed in this alien place. Harper was shouting orders, his voice cracking with fear, but his words were lost in the cacophony. Dr. Singh was sobbing, a broken, whimpering sound that tore at my heart. Then, a new sound. A cracking sound, like the breaking of ice. But this wasn't the ice around us. This was the ice within. The sound of our minds fracturing under the unbearable pressure of the whispers. I felt a cold, alien presence brush against my consciousness. A vast, ancient intelligence that regarded us with chilling indifference. The whispers intensified, becoming a single, coherent thought. A thought that echoed in the deepest recesses of my mind. We are the deep. And you are home. Asterisk. The submersible lurched again, and then everything went black. Part 16. Whispers in the white. The carvings mocked us. They weren't simply depictions of strange, tentacled beings. They told a story, a history etched in the alien stone. Dr. Anya Sharma, our linguist, worked tirelessly, the blue light of her headlamp reflecting in her wide, haunted eyes. She muttered to herself, a stream of phonetic sounds punctuated by frustrated sighs. The rest of us huddled closer, the biting cold seeping through our thermal layers. The generator sputtered, casting long, dancing shadows that twisted the carvings into even more grotesque shapes. I'm getting fragments, Anya finally said, her voice hoarse. Cycles, deep slumber, the cold embrace, a hunger that cannot be sated. A shiver, colder than the Arctic air, ran down my spine. Hunger. We'd seen the skeletal remains in the ice, the strange, circular boreholes in their skulls. The carvings were confirming our worst fears. Whatever lay beneath the ice, it was a predator. There's more, Anya continued, tracing a series of symbols that resembled a spiral. A convergence. A time of awakening, when the stars align. Stars? I asked, glancing upwards through the opening in the ice cave. The aurora borealis shimmered, a ghostly curtain of green and violet. It pulsed with an unnatural rhythm, almost as if responding to Anya's words. Suddenly, the generator choked and died, plunging us into absolute darkness. A collective gasp echoed through the cavern. The only light now came from our emergency headlamps, casting small, frantic circles in the oppressive black. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of melting ice. Then, we heard it. A faint whispering sound, like 1,000 voices murmuring just beyond the reach of hearing. It seemed to emanate from the depths of the megastructure, filtering up through the ice. It rose and fell, a tide of whispers washing over us, chilling us to the bone. What is that?" whispered David, our geologist, his voice trembling. I shook my head, unable to speak. Fear, raw and primal, gripped me. It felt like we were standing on the edge of an abyss, staring into the face of something ancient and unknowable. The whispering intensified, becoming a low, guttural humming. The ice around us seemed to vibrate, the carvings on the walls blurring in our vision. The air grew heavy, making it difficult to breathe. A metallic tang filled the air, like the scent of blood. Then, a shape began to coalesce in the darkness beyond the pool of freezing water at the cavern's heart. It was indistinct at first, a shimmering mirage in the gloom. But as the humming grew louder, the shape solidified, becoming larger, more defined. It was a tentacle. Vast, thick as a redwood trunk, and covered in pulsating veins that glowed with an internal light. It rose from the water, slowly, deliberately, as if testing the air. The surface of the tentacle was slick with a viscous fluid, reflecting the beams of our headlamps like 1,000 malevolent eyes. Another tentacle emerged, and then another, until a cluster of them writhed in the darkness, their movements graceful yet menacing. They swayed and pulsed, the whispering now a deafening roar that seemed to penetrate our skulls. We stumbled back, our fear giving way to panic. We were trapped, cornered in this ancient cavern with a creature beyond our comprehension. "We need to get out of here," I yelled, my voice barely audible above the roar. We scrambled back towards the tunnel we had entered through, our boots slipping on the icy floor. The tentacles lashed out, their tips brushing against the ice, leaving trails of shimmering slime. The roar intensified, the whispers now taking on a distinct quality, a rhythmic pulsing that seemed to synchronize with the throbbing of our own hearts. It was a call, a summons, and we were the intended recipients. We reached the tunnel entrance, squeezing through the narrow opening one by one. The last person through, David, screamed as a tentacle snaked through the opening, its tip brushing against his leg. He scrambled out, his face white with terror, leaving a smear of viscous fluid on the ice. We didn't stop running until we reached the relative safety of our camp. We huddled together, our breaths ragged, listening to the distant roar echoing through the ice. The aurora borealis pulsed overhead, a silent witness to the horror we had unleashed. Anya sat apart from us, her eyes fixed on the shimmering lights. She was muttering to herself again, her voice barely a whisper. "The convergence, it's happening, they're awakening." I looked at her, a chilling realization dawning. The stars weren't just aligning. They were answering a call. And what they were calling forth from the depths of the ice was far more terrifying than anything we could have imagined. Part 17. The Whispers of the Deep. The rhythmic thrumming continued, a low, guttural heartbeat emanating from the depths of the structure. It vibrated through the ice, through the soles of our boots, and into the very marrow of our bones. We pressed on, deeper into the alien architecture, our headlamps carving out pathetic cones of light in the overwhelming darkness. The air grew colder, biting at exposed skin, and a strange, metallic tang coated our tongues. Dr. Singh, usually a bastion of scientific pragmatism, began muttering about ancient prophecies and cosmic horrors. His eyes, wide and unfocused, reflected the flickering beam of his headlamp, making him look like a haunted marionette. I tried to reassure him, to ground him in the reality of our situation. A crumbling, possibly extraterrestrial megastructure beneath the Arctic ice. But even I felt a creeping dread, a primal fear that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. We reached a vast chamber, the largest we'd encountered yet. The ceiling was lost in the impenetrable darkness above, and the walls curved away into the gloom, hinting at a scale beyond human comprehension. The thrumming here was louder, almost oppressive, and punctuated by a new sound, a faint, high-pitched whispering. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, weaving its way into our minds, a chorus of voices too soft to decipher, yet chilling enough to freeze the blood in our veins. "Do you hear that?" Anya whispered, her voice barely audible above the thrumming. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's like whispers. It's getting louder," Dr. Singh mumbled, his eyes darting around the cavern. "They're calling to us." We pressed on, drawn deeper into the chamber by an unseen force. The whispers intensified, twisting into something almost recognizable, words, phrases, snatches of a language that resonated deep within our subconscious. It felt like the ice itself was speaking, its ancient secrets finally revealed. In the center of the chamber, bathed in a faint, ethereal glow, we found it. A colossal, crystalline structure, pulsing with an inner light that shifted and swirled like an aurora borealis trapped in solid form. It was roughly spherical, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shift and change before our eyes. The thrumming emanated from this crystalline heart, the source of the whispers, the very essence of this alien place. As we approached, the whispers intensified, coalescing into distinct voices, speaking directly into our minds. They spoke of ancient times, of cosmic journeys, of a civilization beyond human comprehension. They spoke of knowledge and power, of a universe teeming with life, both wondrous and terrifying. And they spoke of a coming change, a great awakening that would reshape the very fabric of existence. Dr. Singh, lost in a trance-like state, reached out to touch the crystalline structure. His hand passed through its surface, disappearing into the swirling light. He let out a gasp, his eyes widening in a mixture of awe and terror. "I see. I understand," he murmured, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. "They're waiting, they've been waiting for us." Anya and I exchanged a worried glance. Dr. Singh was clearly losing his grip on reality. The whispers, the pulsing light, the sheer alienness of the place. It was all too much. Suddenly, the crystalline structure began to vibrate more intensely. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a deafening roar that filled the chamber. The carvings on its surface swirled and shifted with increasing speed, forming grotesque, otherworldly shapes. The faint, ethereal glow intensified, blinding us with its brilliance. Dr. Singh, still submerged in the light, began to scream. His screams were not of pain, but of something far worse, the shattering of his sanity, the complete and utter breakdown of his mind. He thrashed and writhed, his body contorting in unnatural ways. The light pulsed around him, drawing him deeper into its embrace. Anya and I recoiled in horror, unable to comprehend what was happening. The whispers, now a cacophony of madness, assaulted our minds, threatening to pull us down into the same abyss that had swallowed Dr. Singh. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The light dimmed, the whispers faded, and the crystalline structure fell silent. Dr. Singh's body slumped to the ground, still and lifeless. The only sound was the faint drip of melting ice, a morbid counterpoint to the unnatural silence that now filled the chamber. We stood there, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, staring at the crystalline structure, at the lifeless body of our colleague, at the heart of the alien megastructure that had claimed him. The whispers were gone, but the fear remained, a cold, hard knot in the pit of our stomachs. We were alone, trapped miles beneath the ice, in a place beyond human understanding, with something ancient and powerful that had just awakened. And we knew, with a chilling certainty, that we were next. The echoing clang of the chisel against the strange metal resonated through the cavern, a lonely, metallic heartbeat in the vast, frozen tomb. A fine dust, neither ice nor rock, but something far more alien, drifted down, coating Dr. Anya Sharma's already grimy parka. She shivered, and it wasn't entirely from the cold. The air itself seemed to vibrate with a low hum, a palpable tension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. They had been chipping away at the wall for what felt like an eternity, ever since the ground-penetrating radar had revealed a void beyond the ice. The initial excitement had long since curdled into a nauseating dread. What they had initially hoped was a natural cavern had turned out to be something far more constructed. The smooth, obsidian-like surface they were now painstakingly excavating was unlike anything Anya had ever encountered. It was cold, yes, but not the passive cold of ice. This was a cold that felt hungry. Anything? Captain Hansen's voice, amplified by the cavern's acoustics, startled her. Anya shook her head, brushing the dust from her goggles. Nothing but more of this stuff. It's like trying to chisel through solidified night. Hansen grunted, the sound bouncing off the unseen walls. The flickering beams of their headlamps only served to exaggerate the shadows, making the cavern seem even larger, more menacing. The rest of the team, huddled around a portable heater, looked pale and exhausted. Morale had plummeted since the discovery of the structure. The whispers had started again, the ones about ancient evils and things best left undisturbed. "We should pull back," Dr. Chen, the team's geologist, said, his voice barely a whisper. "This place, it doesn't feel right." Hansen sighed, the sound heavy with fatigue. "We've come this far, Chen. We need to see what's behind this wall." Anya felt a flicker of unease. Hansen, usually so pragmatic, was bordering on obsessive. The discovery of the megastructure had seemed to change him. His eyes, normally clear and focused, now held a strange, almost feverish glint. Suddenly, the chisel struck something different. A high-pitched whine filled the cavern, making Anya's teeth ache. The humming that had permeated the air intensified, growing into a deep, resonant thrum. The ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. "What the hell was that?" one of the crewmen shouted, his voice laced with panic. Before anyone could answer, a section of the obsidian wall slid inwards with a grinding groan, revealing a dark, gaping maw. The whine stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it was almost painful. The air within the opening felt different, colder, and charged with a strange, static energy. A faint, sickly sweet smell wafted from within, a scent that Anya couldn't quite place but that made her stomach churn. Hansen, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, stepped towards the opening. "My God," he breathed. Anya hesitantly followed, her heart pounding in her chest. The beam of her headlamp pierced the darkness, revealing a narrow corridor that stretched into the unknown. The walls were smooth and polished, like the exterior of the structure, but here, faint, intricate carvings covered the surface. They were unlike anything Anya had ever seen, a bizarre mix of geometric shapes and organic forms that seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light. "What is this place?" Dr. Chen whispered, his voice trembling. Anya didn't answer. She couldn't. Her gaze was fixed on something further down the corridor. Something that made her blood run cold. At the far end of the corridor, partially obscured by shadows, was a shape. It was tall and slender, almost humanoid, but its proportions were subtly wrong, elongated and distorted. It stood perfectly still, as if frozen in time, but Anya could have sworn she saw a flicker of movement, a subtle shift in its posture. Then, the shape moved. It turned its head slowly, deliberately, as if it had heard them. Anya couldn't see its face clearly, but she could feel its gaze, a cold, penetrating stare that seemed to bore into her very soul. A low, guttural growl echoed from the depths of the corridor, a sound that seemed to vibrate in Anya's bones. It was a sound of immense age, of unimaginable power. A sound that spoke of something ancient and terrible awakening from a long, icy slumber. Hansen, seemingly oblivious to the growing dread that gripped Anya, took a step forward. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing down the corridor. The figure didn't respond. It simply stood there, its shadowy form growing larger, more menacing with each passing second. The growl intensified, joined now by a chorus of whispers, soft and sibilant, that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Anya grabbed Hansen's arm, her fingers digging into his parka. "We need to go," she hissed, her voice barely audible above the growing cacophony. "Now." Hansen hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the figure. But the fear in Anya's voice, the sheer terror in her eyes, finally seemed to register. He turned, his face pale and drawn, and together they stumbled back towards the opening, the chilling whispers and the guttural growls pursuing them like icy fingers reaching out from the darkness. Part 19. The Echoing Cold. The drone's feed flickered, a blizzard of static obscuring the already dim landscape. The wind howled like a banshee, a sound that seemed to penetrate the thick walls of the icebreaker and claw at our sanity. We'd pushed further into the crevasse, the looming walls closing in, a claustrophobic embrace of ice and shadow. The temperature had plummeted, frosting the inside of the control room. Our breath plumed before us, each exhale a miniature ghost vanishing into the frigid air. Signals degrading, Anya muttered, her face bathed in the eerie glow of the monitor. We're losing visual. Can you stabilize it? Captain Volkov's voice was tight, his usual stoicism cracking under the pressure. Anya's fingers danced across the keyboard, but the image only worsened. The static thickened, coalescing into a swirling vortex of gray. Then, for a fleeting moment, something flashed across the screen. A vast, geometric shape, too immense to comprehend, swallowed by the returning static. Did you see that? Dr. Sharma whispered, her eyes wide. We all had. A chilling silence descended upon the control room, broken only by the relentless wind and the hum of the icebreaker's engines. The shape, even glimpsed for a fraction of a second, had resonated with a profound sense of wrongness, of something ancient and utterly alien. Run it back, Volkov ordered, his voice hoarse. Anya complied, replaying the recording. We all leaned forward, our gazes fixed on the screen. Frame by frame, we analyzed the fleeting image. The shape, whatever it was, seemed to defy Euclidean geometry. Angles met in impossible ways, lines twisted and contorted into a non-Euclidean nightmare. It's like something out of a Lovecraft story, Dr. Sharma breathed, her voice trembling. A low, resonating hum began to permeate the air, vibrating through the deck plating and into our bones. It wasn't a mechanical sound, but something more organic, like the deep, guttural moan of a colossal beast. What is that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. No one answered. The hum intensified, growing louder, filling the air with a palpable sense of dread. The icebreaker shuddered, as if something vast was brushing against its hull. We need to get out of here, Volkov said, his face pale. Now. He barked orders at the crew, his voice echoing in the strained silence. The icebreaker's engines roared to life, straining against the encroaching ice. But we weren't moving, we were trapped. The humming intensified, morphing into a series of rhythmic pulses, each one sending a tremor through the ship. The lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. Then, the drone feed, lost in static, suddenly cleared. We saw it then, the megastructure. It wasn't a single structure, but a complex of interconnected shapes, a colossal labyrinth of impossible angles and non-Euclidean architecture. It stretched as far as the drone's camera could see, dwarfing the icebreaker and making it seem like an insignificant toy. Its surface was a patchwork of strange, pulsating lights, shifting and changing in a hypnotic rhythm that synced with the unsettling hum. It was as if the structure itself was breathing, a colossal, alien organism slumbering beneath the ice. And then, we saw the openings. Vast, dark apertures dotted the structure's surface, like gaping maws leading into an unimaginable abyss. The hum emanating from the structure seemed to be coming from these openings, a low, guttural chant that resonated with a primal fear deep within our souls. Suddenly, a shape moved in one of the openings. Something vast and dark, its form obscured by the shadows. It shifted and writhed, its movements slow and deliberate, like a leviathan stirring in the depths. We could only glimpse fragments of its form, a tentacle, a segmented limb, a glimpse of something that resembled an eye, vast and cold, staring directly at the drone's camera. A wave of nausea washed over me. The hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar that seemed to tear at the fabric of reality. The icebreaker groaned under the immense pressure, the walls creaking and groaning. Get us out of here, Volkov roared, his voice barely audible over the din. Full reverse. Now. The engines screamed, straining against the impossible. But it was too late. The ice around us began to crack and shift, the crevasse closing in, swallowing us whole. The last thing I saw, before the drone's feed cut to black, was the vast, dark shape emerging from the opening, its colossal form blotting out the light, its cold, alien gaze fixed on us. The hum continued, echoing in the darkness, a chilling lullaby as the ice closed in, sealing our fate within the frozen tomb of the megastructure. Part 20. The Silent Chorus. The pulsating rhythm, now a deep thrumming in our very bones, grew stronger as we descended further into the megastructure. The ice shaft, artificially smooth and impossibly straight, seemed to swallow the light from our headlamps, the beams dissolving into an oppressive, velvety darkness below. The air, thick with an unnerving stillness, carried the faint, metallic scent of blood, though we could see no source. The rope ladder, anchored precariously to a lip of the shaft, swayed with our descent. Each metallic clang of the carabiner against the frozen rung echoed eerily, the sound warped and distorted by the vast emptiness surrounding us. Below, the pulsing intensified, accompanied by a low, guttural hum that resonated deep within our chests. It felt as if the structure itself was breathing, a slow, deliberate inhalation and exhalation of some ancient, alien power. Anything? Anya's voice, strained and tight, crackled over the comms. She was several rungs below me, her headlamp a tiny beacon in the abyss. Just darkness, I replied, my voice a hollow whisper. And that sound, it's getting louder. The hum grew into a chorus, a multitude of voices blending into a single, droning chant. It was unsettlingly organic, a sound that shouldn't have emanated from this cold, metallic structure. It felt like the murmurings of a colossal, unseen entity, a slumbering giant roused by our intrusion. Finally, the ladder ended. Anya had already reached the bottom, her headlamp illuminating a circular platform carved into the ice. The pulsating light emanated from a vast, cavernous space beyond, the edges lost in the swirling shadows. I climbed down, the cold, slick ice biting into my gloved hands. The platform was covered in a thin layer of frost, disturbed only by our footprints. The metallic tang in the air was stronger here, almost overpowering. What is this place? Anya whispered, her voice barely audible above the droning chorus. We moved towards the opening, our headlamps cutting through the darkness, revealing a sight that defied comprehension. It was a chamber of colossal proportions, the ceiling lost in the shadows far above. The walls were a complex latticework of metallic structures, interwoven with pulsating veins of light that pulsed in time with the rhythmic thrumming. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and the droning chant echoed and reverberated, amplified by the vastness of the space. But it was the objects suspended in the center of the chamber that truly stole our breath. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of them. Shapes vaguely humanoid, encased in crystalline pods, filled with a luminescent, viscous fluid. They floated gently, swaying in unison, their pale, almost translucent forms dimly visible within their icy prisons. The droning chant seemed to emanate from these figures, a collective whisper of countless voices. It was a sound of sorrow, of longing, of something ancient and profoundly disturbing. Are they alive? Anya breathed, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and horror. I reached out, my gloved hand hovering just inches from one of the crystalline pods. The surface was cold, smooth, and pulsating faintly with the same rhythmic light as the surrounding structure. Inside, the humanoid form drifted serenely, its features indistinct, its eyes closed. A network of thin, luminous filaments connected the figure to the pod, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. As I watched, the figure's chest rose and fell, a shallow, almost imperceptible breath. I think so, I whispered, pulling my hand back. The sight was mesmerizing, horrifying, and utterly captivating all at once. Suddenly, the droning chant intensified, rising into a crescendo of sound. The pulsating lights grew brighter, bathing the chamber in an eerie, otherworldly glow. The crystalline pods began to vibrate, the humanoid figures within stirring from their slumber. Anya gasped, stumbling back. What's happening? I didn't know. Fear, cold and sharp, gripped my heart. We were intruders in a place we were never meant to see, witnessing something ancient and unknowable. The air crackled with energy, and the metallic scent of blood intensified, thick and cloying. The figures in the pods began to open their eyes. They were not human eyes. They were vast, black, and filled with an ancient, alien intelligence. And they were staring directly at us. The droning chant reached a fever pitch, a deafening roar that resonated through the chamber. The ice beneath our feet trembled, and cracks began to spiderweb across the platform. We were trapped, caught in the awakening of something truly terrifying. Something that had been slumbering beneath the Arctic ice for millennia. Something that was now awake. Part 21. The Cold Symmetry. The echoing clang of metal on metal, distorted and amplified by the cavernous space, was the only sound for what felt like an eternity. The flare sputtered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and shift, revealing more of the colossal structure around us. It wasn't natural. No ice formation, no geological wonder could create this unerringly perfect symmetry. Massive, polished obsidian-like pillars rose into the gloom, their surfaces etched with intricate patterns that shimmered with an internal light, a cold, alien luminescence that made Anya shiver. We stood at the edge of a vast chamber, the floor a single sheet of the same black material, reflecting the flickering flare like a dark mirror. The air, surprisingly, was not as frigid as outside. It held a strange stillness, a heavy pressure that made each breath feel laborious. The faint, organic smell that had permeated the tunnel was stronger here, now tinged with something metallic, something almost sweet. This isn't possible, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible above the crackling of the flare. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch one of the pillars. I grabbed her arm. Don't. Her eyes, wide and reflecting the strange light, met mine. Why not? I don't know, I admitted, my voice tight. It just doesn't feel right. The surface of the pillar seemed to pulse faintly under the light, the etched patterns shifting like tiny, writhing worms. We moved slowly into the chamber, the crunching of our boots on the glassy floor the only sound breaking the unnerving silence. The flare illuminated more of the space, revealing the true scale of the structure. It was immense, stretching beyond the reach of our light, the obsidian pillars rising like silent sentinels into the impenetrable darkness above. The air grew heavier, the sweet metallic smell more pronounced. I felt a pressure in my ears, a subtle throbbing at the back of my skull. Anya, walking behind us, whimpered softly. I turned to see her clutching her head, her face pale and drawn. Anya? What's wrong? She shook her head, unable to speak. Her eyes, wide and unfocused, seemed to be looking at something beyond us, something we couldn't see. Then, she pointed a trembling finger towards the far end of the chamber. Following her gaze, I squinted into the darkness. At the very limit of the flare's reach, something moved. A flicker of movement, too quick to discern, but enough to make my heart leap into my throat. We moved closer, our pace slow and cautious. The feeling of unease intensified with each step. The throbbing in my head grew stronger, resonating with the faint pulsing of the obsidian pillars. It felt as though the very structure was breathing, its slow, rhythmic inhalations and exhalations pulling us deeper into its heart. As we approached the far end of the chamber, the movement became more defined. It was a shape, a large, amorphous shape that seemed to undulate and shift in the darkness. The sweet, metallic smell was overpowering now, thick and cloying, making me gag. The flare sputtered again, threatening to die. I fumbled for another in my pack, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. Finally, with a burst of light, the new flare ignited, illuminating the shape in its entirety. It was a mass, a pulsating, organic mass that clung to the base of one of the obsidian pillars. It was dark, almost black, but with streaks of crimson and violet that pulsed with a sickening rhythm. It resembled flesh, but a flesh unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was smooth and glistening, like polished obsidian itself, but with a subtle movement, a constant rippling and shifting that made my stomach churn. And then, it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it detached a portion of itself from the pillar and began to flow towards us, a dark, viscous stream creeping across the glassy floor. Anya screamed. Lena gasped, stumbling back. I froze, my mind reeling, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. This wasn't ice. This wasn't rock. This was alive. The thing, whatever it was, moved with an unnatural grace, its edges constantly shifting and reforming. It pulsed with an internal light, the crimson and violet streaks intensifying as it approached, casting a ghastly glow on the surrounding pillars. We backed away slowly, our eyes fixed on the creeping mass. The flare illuminated its surface, revealing intricate patterns that mirrored those etched on the obsidian pillars. Patterns that seemed to writhe and shift, as if alive. The throbbing in my head reached a crescendo, a painful pulse that echoed the rhythmic pulsing of the creature before us. And then, a voice, a whisper, soft and insidious, echoed in my mind. It wasn't a sound I heard with my ears, but a sensation, a vibration that resonated deep within my skull. "Welcome, asterisk," it whispered. "We have been waiting, asterisk." The flare flickered and died, plunging us into darkness, leaving us alone with the creeping horror and the chilling whisper that promised only oblivion. Part 22. The Cold Embrace. The silence that followed Anya's scream was thick enough to choke on. It was the silence of held breaths, of terror frozen in time. The echoing clang of the dropped flare gun resonated in the unnatural cavern, the flickering orange light revealing nothing but the grotesque, pulsating walls of the tunnel we had foolishly entered. Anya's flashlight beam, now pointing haphazardly at the ceiling, danced over a network of veins that seemed to throb with a sickening rhythm. Where did it go?" Dimitri whispered, his voice trembling. His hand gripped his ice axe like a lifeline. I couldn't answer. My own heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The thing, whatever it was, had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. One moment it was there, its segmented, chitinous body reflecting the firelight, its multifaceted eyes burning with malevolent intelligence. The next, it was gone. Absorbed back into the darkness, a predator returning to its lair. We stood frozen for an eternity, each of us straining to hear something, anything, over the pounding of our blood in our ears. The only sound was the faint drip, drip, drip of melting ice from the cavern walls. Each drop seemed to magnify the silence, adding to the unbearable tension. "We need to go," Anya said, her voice strained. She retrieved the flare gun, her hand shaking so violently that it clattered against the metal. We turned to retreat, our steps slow and hesitant. The tunnel, which had seemed so inviting just moments ago, now felt like a suffocating trap. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking horror. Every ripple in the fleshy walls felt like a twitching muscle, waiting to spring. As we moved, I noticed something new. The pulsing of the walls seemed to be getting stronger, faster. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with a coppery, metallic scent that made my stomach churn. I glanced back at Anya and Dimitri. Their faces were pale and drawn, their eyes wide with fear. Then, we heard it. A low, guttural growl, resonating from the depths of the cavern. It was a sound that vibrated in our bones, a sound that spoke of ancient power and unimaginable hunger. We broke into a run, our boots slipping on the icy floor. The flare gun cast long, flickering shadows that danced around us like grotesque, mocking figures. The growling grew louder, closer, chasing us down the tunnel like a pack of ravenous wolves. We reached the intersection where we had entered the cavern and stumbled back into the main chamber. The relative openness offered little comfort. The pulsing of the walls here was even more pronounced, the air thick with the metallic stench. "We're trapped," Dimitri cried, his voice cracking with despair. He was right. The tunnel we had just fled was the only exit we had found. Now, with the growling echoing behind us, it was clear that path was closed. We were surrounded by the pulsating flesh of the megastructure, its rhythmic throbbing growing increasingly frantic. Suddenly, a section of the wall in front of us began to bulge outwards. The fleshy material stretched and contorted, forming a grotesque parody of a doorway. The growling intensified, reaching a fever pitch. Anya raised the flare gun, her hand trembling. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice thin and reedy. The fleshy doorway ripped open, revealing a darkness so profound it seemed to suck the light from the flare. The growling turned into a screech, a piercing, ear-splitting shriek that made us recoil in agony. Then, from the darkness, something emerged. It was larger than the creature we had seen in the tunnel, its segmented body glistening with a viscous slime. Its multifaceted eyes glowed with a cold, inhuman intelligence, and its mandibles clicked and clacked together like sharpened blades. Anya fired the flare gun. The projectile arced through the air, striking the creature in the chest. The flare burst into a shower of sparks, momentarily illuminating the creature's grotesque form. It recoiled, hissing and spitting, but the flames seemed to have little effect. The creature lunged forward, its mandibles snapping. Anya screamed and stumbled back, dropping the flare gun. Dmitri raised his ice axe and swung, but the creature was too fast. It swatted the axe aside like a twig and lunged at Dmitri, its mandibles sinking into his shoulder. Dmitri screamed, a high-pitched, desperate sound that was cut short as the creature lifted him into the air and dragged him back into the darkness. The fleshy doorway closed behind them, leaving Anya and me standing alone in the pulsating chamber, the echoing screams of our friend ringing in our ears. The silence returned, heavier, more oppressive than before. Anya looked at me, her eyes filled with a stark, unyielding terror. We were alone, trapped in the heart of a nightmare, and the Arctic ice offered no escape. What if the Arctic ice hides a lost megastructure? Part 23. The cavern pulsed with a sickly green luminescence, emanating not from the walls themselves, but from the writhing mass suspended within the ice. It had grown, engulfing the entire chamber, its fleshy tendrils now thick as pythons, throbbing with a rhythm that resonated deep within our chests. The pulsating light cast grotesque shadows that danced around us, mocking our fear. Anya whimpered, clutching her injured arm. The medic, whose name I'd never learned, was slumped against a wall, eyes glazed over, mumbling incoherently about the stars being right. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a gnawing dread that settled heavy in my stomach. This wasn't some ancient civilization, some forgotten marvel of engineering. This was something else. Something alive, and growing rapidly. And we were trapped inside it. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice shaky but resolute. I looked to Captain Volkov. He remained eerily calm, his gaze fixed on the pulsating mass. He held the strange, angular artifact he'd retrieved from the pedestal, turning it over and over in his gloved hands. "It's too late," he finally said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "This entity, it has us." "What do you mean?" Anya asked, her voice rising in panic. Volkov sighed, a long, drawn-out exhale that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "This artifact," he held it up, the green light reflecting in his eyes, "it's a key. A key to a lock we should never have opened." He gestured toward the pulsating mass. "This thing, it's been dormant for millennia, trapped beneath the ice. We woke it." The air grew colder, the green luminescence intensifying. The rhythmic pulsing quickened, and I felt a strange pressure building in my ears. The ice around us began to crack, spiderweb fractures spreading across its surface. "It's communicating," the medic suddenly rasped, his eyes now wide with a terrifying clarity. "I can hear it. It's ancient, older than the earth itself." The pressure intensified, and a low, guttural hum filled the cavern, vibrating through the very ice beneath our feet. It was a sound that seemed to bypass our ears and resonate directly within our skulls, a sound that spoke of unimaginable age and power. "It's calling, something," Volkov muttered, his face pale. "Something vast." A new crack appeared in the ice, this one wider and deeper than the others. A thick, viscous fluid began to seep out, glowing with the same unsettling green light. It pooled on the floor, bubbling and hissing, and the stench that rose from it was overpowering, a sickening mix of decay and something alien. "What is that?" Anya whispered, her voice choked with fear. "I don't know," Volkov replied, his eyes fixated on the growing pool. "But I don't think we want to find out." The hum intensified, becoming a deafening roar. The ice above us shattered, revealing a swirling vortex of green light that stretched upwards, disappearing into the darkness. The pulsating mass throbbed faster and faster, its tendrils reaching out, probing, searching. The medic screamed, a high-pitched, keening wail that was cut short abruptly as one of the tendrils wrapped around him, lifting him into the air. He struggled, his limbs flailing uselessly as he was drawn towards the vortex. We watched in horrified silence as he was swallowed by the green light, his screams echoing faintly before being consumed by the roar. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but I forced myself to remain calm. We had to escape. There had to be a way out. "The tunnel," I yelled, pointing back the way we had come. We have to go back. Volkov looked at me, his face a mask of despair. It's no use, he said. It's everywhere. He was right. The green luminescence was now permeating the entire cavern, seeping into the ice, filling every crevice and crack. The air was thick with the foul-smelling fluid, and the roar was deafening. Anya screamed again as a tendril lashed out, wrapping around her leg. She fell to the ground, scrambling backwards, her eyes wide with terror. I grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the tunnel. We stumbled through the darkness, the ice cracking beneath our feet, the roar of the entity echoing in our ears. The tendrils were everywhere, reaching, grasping, searching. We reached the tunnel entrance, but it was too late. The green light had already filled the passage, and the pulsating mass was blocking our way. We were trapped. Volkov stood beside us, his face etched with resignation. He held the artifact tightly in his hand, its green glow pulsing in time with the entity. It's the end, he whispered, his voice barely audible above the roar. The end of everything. The tendrils reached for us, and the green light engulfed us. The last thing I saw was the artifact, glowing brightly in Volkov's hand, as the darkness consumed us all. Part 24. The Whispers of the Deep. The cavern pulsed with a sickly green light, emanating from the colossal, pulsating organ at its heart. It dominated the space, a grotesque cathedral of flesh and bone woven with pulsating veins of luminescent energy. We stood, transfixed, the dwindling beams of our headlamps swallowed by the vastness of the chamber. The silence, once oppressive, was now filled with a faint, rhythmic thrumming, like a gargantuan heart beating far too slowly. By God, Anya whispered, her voice choked with awe and terror. The faint glow reflected in her wide, terrified eyes. Even Captain Volkov, the hardened veteran, seemed shaken. He gripped his rifle tightly, knuckles white, his gaze fixed on the pulsing organ. This is beyond anything. The organ throbbed again, and a wave of nausea washed over me. It was a physical sensation, a visceral repulsion that emanated from the structure itself. It felt wrong, unnatural, a violation of the very laws of nature. Elias, clutching his damaged arm, swayed on his feet. The whispers, they're getting louder. I strained my ears. He was right. A faint whispering, almost subliminal, permeated the air. It seemed to emanate from the organ, swirling around us like an unseen current. It wasn't a language I recognized, not human, not anything I'd ever encountered before. It burrowed into my mind, scratching at the edges of my sanity. We moved closer, drawn by some morbid fascination, some irresistible pull towards the heart of the nightmare. The ground beneath our feet felt strangely soft, yielding slightly with each step. As we approached the organ, the whispers intensified, becoming a chorus of sibilant murmurs, weaving themselves into a disjointed narrative. I began to pick out fragments, disjointed images flashing through my mind. Vast, star-strewn voids, swirling nebulae, colossal entities drifting through the cosmos. Then, a chilling image of Earth, seen from a perspective that could only be from space, a tiny blue marble against the backdrop of infinity. The organ pulsed again, and the green light intensified, flooding the cavern with an unsettling radiance. The whispers became a roar, a cacophony of voices that seemed to claw at my sanity. I stumbled back, clutching my head, trying to shut out the overwhelming sensory overload. It's communicating, Anya stammered, her voice strained. It's showing us something. She was right. Projected onto the cavern wall, like some monstrous, otherworldly cinema, were images, fleeting and fragmented, but undeniably real. We saw the construction of the megastructure, vast, tentacled machines manipulating matter with impossible precision. We saw beings, if they could be called that, existing as pure energy, their forms shifting and changing like the aurora borealis. Then, a different image, a desolate, lifeless planet. Cracked earth, poisoned skies, the remnants of a once thriving civilization reduced to dust. The whispers intensified, becoming a piercing shriek that resonated through the cavern. The organ pulsed violently, bathing the chamber in a blinding green light. I felt a searing pain in my skull, as if my brain were about to explode. And then, silence. The green light faded, leaving us blinking in the sudden darkness. The whispers subsided, leaving a ringing silence in their wake. The images on the cavern wall vanished, replaced by the rough, icy surface of the cave. We stood there, dazed, trying to comprehend what we had witnessed. The silence stretched, broken only by our ragged breathing. Elias, his face pale and drawn, finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. They were refugees. Fleeing a dying world. They built this place, to survive. But, he trailed off, his eyes wide with horror. But what? Volkov demanded, his voice hoarse. Elias shook his head. They didn't survive. Something happened. Something went wrong. He pointed a trembling finger at the organ. This is what's left. A monument to their failure. A warning. The chilling implication of his words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just a megastructure. It was a tomb. And the organ, the pulsing, whispering heart of it all. It's not dead, I whispered, a cold dread gripping my heart. It's dormant, waiting. We all knew what it was waiting for. A new host. A new world to consume. And we, the unwitting intruders, had just awakened it. The humming intensified, a low thrum vibrating through the ice, through the submersible, through my very bones. The glyphs on the central spire blazed with an unholy luminescence, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the Cyclopean city. We were trapped, suspended in the black abyss above the structure, the submersible caught in some invisible field. Anya was unresponsive, her eyes wide and unseeing, reflecting the alien light. The radio remained stubbornly silent. We were utterly alone. Then, the city moved. Not a physical shift, not a tremor of the ice, but something more profound, a warping of perspective. The angles seemed to change, the towering spires appearing to lean inwards, the vast avenues curving in impossible ways. The humming grew louder, morphing into a deep, resonant chant, a sound that seemed to bypass my ears and resonate directly within my skull. The glyphs on the spire began to shift and flow, transforming into a swirling vortex of light that sucked my gaze inwards. I tore my eyes away, a wave of nausea washing over me. I looked at Anya, but she remained entranced, her face bathed in the unnatural glow. I reached for her, trying to shake her awake, but my hand passed right through her arm. Panic clawed at my throat. She wasn't real. None of it was. The submersible lurched, the hum dropping to a low, guttural growl. The city before us began to dissolve, the solid structures melting into a viscous, iridescent fluid. The glyphs on the spire coalesced into a single, enormous eye, pulsing with a light that seemed to pierce through my very being. The eye swiveled, fixing its gaze upon me. I felt a cold dread unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't just a megastructure, it was something far older, far more powerful, than anything humanity could comprehend. It was a presence, a consciousness, vast and ancient, and it was aware of me. The eye blinked, and the submersible plunged downwards, the fluid city parting before us like a curtain. We descended into a darkness so profound it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. The humming returned, now accompanied by a susurrus, a whispering that seemed to emanate from the darkness itself. I could feel the presence all around me, probing, examining, dissecting my very thoughts. Then, we stopped. The submersible's lights flickered on, revealing a chamber of impossible size. The walls were smooth and obsidian-like, reflecting the light back in a dizzying array. In the center of the chamber, a single object floated, suspended in mid-air. It was a sphere, perfectly smooth, made of a material that seemed to absorb the light, rendering it a void in the center of the chamber. It pulsed with the same unnatural light as the glyphs, a slow, rhythmic beat that echoed the hum resonating through the chamber. As I watched, the sphere began to rotate, slowly at first, then faster and faster, until it was a blur of darkness. The humming intensified, the whispering grew louder, the walls of the chamber began to vibrate. I felt a pressure building in my ears, in my sinuses, in my chest, as if the very air was being compressed. The sphere stopped rotating. Silence. Then, the whispering coalesced into a single, clear voice, a voice that seemed to speak directly into my mind. You seek knowledge. We offer understanding. Asterisk. My mind reeled. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The voice continued, its tone both ancient and alien. The ice preserves. The ice remembers. The ice reveals. Asterisk. Images flooded my mind, a torrent of information, of history, of knowledge that spanned eons. I saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of stars, the slow, inexorable march of entropy. I saw the truth about the megastructure, about the entity that resided within, about its purpose. And the truth was terrifying. The entity was not a builder, but a preserver, a curator of the universe's dying embers. The megastructure was not a city, but a tomb, a repository of the memories of countless extinct civilizations. The entity had drawn us here, not to harm us, but to offer us a choice. A choice between oblivion and remembrance. The voice echoed in my mind again, cold and dispassionate. Join us. Become part of the archive. Your memories, your knowledge, your very being, preserved for eternity. Asterisk. I looked at Anya, still unresponsive, still bathed in the unnatural glow. I thought of the world above, of the sun, of the wind, of the taste of rain. I thought of life, in all its messy, chaotic glory. And I made my choice. I closed my eyes. The humming intensified. The whispering grew louder. The darkness embraced me. The last thing I heard, before the silence consumed me, was the faint, echoing sound of cracking ice. The ice, remembering. The ice, revealing. The ice, releasing. Epilogue. The research vessel Aurora Borealis never returned from its expedition to the Arctic. The submersible, discovered years later lodged in a newly formed rift in the ice, was empty. No bodies were ever recovered. The only evidence of what happened was a single, strange artifact found within the submersible, a smooth, obsidian-like sphere, no larger than a marble, pulsing with a faint, internal light. Its purpose, like the fate of the crew, remains a chilling mystery, a testament to the vast, unknowable depths that lie hidden beneath the ice.